Chelsea versus Crystal Palace. In today's video, we are going to discuss a few different things. We're going to start off by discussing the sort of new shape that Maresca used and why it was clever, and the clever usage of the fullbacks. Pretty much after Glasner came out and said that Maresca couldn't fool him, he couldn't surprise him. He was expecting the 3-2-5 or the 3-1-6, and we completely switched it up, and it works, in my opinion. I think especially that first half looked really, really good. Then we're going to go on and touch on the second half tweak, which a lot of people have been quite confused about, and the positives and negatives of that tweak. And then we will finish the video by going into a little issue that I have with just the team at the minute. And I think it's shown again in this game. It's probably the next thing that needs a little bit of improvement. We spoke about low blocks in recent weeks, and yes, they've been a bit of an issue, but I think there's something else that we need to sort of address. Anyway, welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are well and good. Please do drop a like on the channel to support me. We're going to be trying to get it. I think we're reworking the schedule to try and do 2 videos a week now. I'm doing daily TikToks, daily Twitter sort of posts, daily articles. So we're going to try and make at least 2 YouTube videos a week, maybe 3. That's going to be the aim. Try to take all the content up a level this year and see where we can take it. So, as you can see on screen, this is how Chelsea set up against Crystal Palace. We've got Crystal Palace in yellow, even though they didn't play in yellow, just because it'll be easier to see. And the build-up shape was very much wide split centre-backs. Well, more so to do with the width of how the full-backs were split, right? So you had the centre-backs in here like this. The full-backs split nice and wide in these areas, and then Caicedo in this sort of single pivot. What many would say is it is basically an iteration of a 4-3-3, which you could, yeah, that's true. Some people may label it the 2 here and then the 3 here as like a 2-3 base because you've got these guys applied on the same line as Caicedo. But of course, they are playing as left back and right back. You could call it a 4-1 base with these sort of 2 inside players. Either way, the outcome and the aim of this game was exactly the same. The idea of these 2 players, if we get this, is to pin these players essentially away from the centre-backs, right? So what this means is these guys, if they want to go and press, they have to leave a massive open space for someone like Gusto. And we saw this a few times in the game with Eze jumping out from that, from this 3-line, this front 3 of pressure. And same again over here. If he wants to press here, Cucurella is going to be the free man because these guys are occupied as well in the pockets with Palmer and Enzo. And just to give you a screenshot so that you understand what we're talking about here, Eze with the purple circle around him there, he looks to go and apply pressure to a Chempong on the ball, leaving Gusto in that space that we spoke about, circled in yellow. Again, this leaves the midfield 3 without Eze there, meaning that Mitchell does have to jump off of Pedro Neto, which opens up that space for him in behind. But then you also have this example, and the example I'm talking about is Lerma jumping onto Caicedo and actually Eze going out to press Malo Gusto. So what this does then leave is with Decore basically shadowing and marking Enzo Fernandez, Palmer is the free man, which causes Gurhi to jump out of that back line, leaving Palace with just 4 at the back in this moment. And the idea there is essentially to make it that if these guys jump forward, you've still got this 4 versus 3. And then with Caicedo, as he can sort of drop in and out, you've then also got this triangle here that is making that 3v2. And again, this is something we spoke about in the Palace game before. It's all about these situational overloads. Can you overload and have that positional, not positional, it's not wrong, the numerical superiority in every area of the pitch? Now, of course, in the attacking area, that does leave you 3 versus 5. But the idea then being that if Enzo and Palmer can break off, then you can sort of attack that line with 5v5. And again, we're going to talk about how the fullbacks usage allowed Chelsea to almost find that 6v5 on the last line. So let's talk about the sort of the idea of where Chelsea thought they could progress the ball and get into these areas easier. Palace, with this sort of central shape here, with this sort of pentagon, they're trying to stay narrow, these midfielders, and that's, again, why you play these fullbacks, because you want to try and drag them out a little bit to make that space to sort of enter the pocket of Caicedo. But if they're staying really narrow, the idea is that I think Maresca thought his best bet was to almost go around the outside and find these double ups down the wing with these sort of 2v1s with the wing back, especially because these inside forwards would sort of be, again, at times trying to be narrow to apply pressure on those outside centre backs. So what we often saw was, especially on this right side, was Eze looking to jump out. And I think maybe it's because Acheampong was the sort of the trigger point, because again, it's his debut. So you're trying to sort of get a little bit of scraps. You're trying to sort of figure out where's your best bet to press from. So Chempong, it seemed like he was more reliably pressed by Eze. So when he pressed up, what it would leave is this big gap for Gusto. Neto, what he was cleverly doing is sort of dragging inside with Mitchell to pin Mitchell here. And sometimes he was sort of between the two, so that he could, obviously, Mitchell then felt like he could press, but he's still keeping Mitchell away from that until the ball reaches Gusto. That means once Gusto gets the ball here, Mitchell has a big distance to cover to apply any pressure to Gusto. So Gusto can then move up into this channel a little bit by time Mitchell's to get the ball. And if Mitchell does choose to cover that big distance, Neto can then peel back off into this channel. And then what you've basically got is you've got this whole defence having to shift over to follow Neto. And again, this happened for the goal on the other side as well, with Cucurella, Munoz following really high, and then Sancho being able to basically isolate, I think it was Richards out wide for the goal. So that worked perfectly on both sides. And that was working really well with them pinning almost in these inside channels before rolling back out to the wing, which is something we haven't seen as much this season with Enzo Maresca, because it was very sort of tailor-made for this game. The other thing is that if Mitchell didn't decide to cover that big distance, as we spoke about, and Neto kept him sort of pinned here, and Neto's sort of he's basically got two players pinned there, right? Then one, Gusto can travel forward, but two, it's harder for the centre back to jump out on Palmer, because if this player is then part of that, Eze's pressed here, which means somebody's got to press into Casado. And if it was this side, usually, because this is the ball side, right? So usually it'd be the ball side centre mid that has to press. That then leaves Palmer. Usually it was Gurhi having to press out on Palmer. But again, if Neto's got him pinned, he can't do that. So Palmer was then able to receive in this space really nicely. And again, it happened a few times where Palmer could get on that ball in there, make a turn and play out. So the game plan overall, I really liked it from Maresca. I thought it was really, really good. I think he came in with the correct plan. It worked. The first half, we looked really, really good. And there's not much else to say about that. However, in the second half, a lot of people are sort of touching on. I don't know why I use that colour, to be fair. It doesn't really stand out. And green doesn't either, but we're going to do it like that. What happened in the second half is Maresca decided to change Palmer and Enzo. Now, I had to rewatch the game for this because I had my own sort of suspicions as to why it was done. I thought, and I still think to an extent, when I'm watching it back, it still looks like he did it to sort of drag Decore away, because of these two players, you had Decore this one, Lerma this one. The more common to jump out of this two was Decore to apply pressure. Now, what this does is it just changes the dynamic a bit. Lerma is usually a little bit more, and they create this sort of line here. Lerma does jump out as well at times, but it looked a little bit more like this slightly more often. So I think one thing that you get by moving Palmer over here is Doucouré basically feels like he can't jump out. He has to stick on Palmer, and if he does jump out, you're leaving Palmer in acres of space. So that's one thing. The other thing is Gurhi was doing a really good job at jumping out from here, and Richards seemed much more hesitant to do it on the other side. So again, a slight change. If Palmer can receive the ball here and Richards is hesitant whether to jump out or not, and he's sort of like half and half, Palmer's going to have a little bit more space to sort of operate. Okay, so again, another sort of attacking point of view that you could get a little bit of joy from for Palmer. Now, after rewatching the game again and realizing the exact moment where Maresca changed it, which was essentially Eze's huge chance at the start of the second half, I actually think as well it had a big part to do with how Crystal Palace was pressing, and I'm going to quickly show you that now with some screenshots.
I've just realised I keep accidentally saying the Palace press. What I actually mean is the Palace build-up and the Chelsea press. And as you can see here, Enzo Fernandez looking to apply pressure because Doucouré is actually the one dropping deeper, with Lerma dragging Palmer further away. This is the Palace build-up that leads to the Eze chance, and then just minutes later, this is the change that is made, with Enzo Fernandez being the one to drop a bit deeper off and Palmer defending in those higher areas on that left-hand side. So again, I think this has part of the reason to do with why Maresca tweaked the positions of Palmer and Enzo and swapped them around.
So hopefully that gives you an idea of why Crystal Palace, why Chelsea changed to sort of adapt to that Palace press. Like I say, I think there's other parts to it. I think another part of it is that if Palmer is dragging Doucouré away and then Munoz is breaking off the back of Sancho and that ball does go long as soon as they win the ball back, what was happening a lot of the time is if Munoz and Sarr, these two here, were winning sort of that 2v1 against Cucurella, and one of them was winning that sort of second ball and it was bobbling into here, because Doucouré was the more aggressive, it was sort of creating this triangle of pressure in this area of the pitch in that first half, or towards the end of that first half, where they could apply real good sort of second ball pressure as that ball dropped. And that's why they got quite a lot of joy from being direct in this channel, because like I say, they had Doucouré winning those second balls in here as well. So another sort of aspect of it is if you drag Doucouré away from that with Palmer, then there's less sort of pressure. Caicedo can come over and try and sweep, and you basically end up in a bit more of a 2v2 here, with Caicedo, Cucurella, Sarr and Munoz. And again, if Sancho was tracking back really well, then if anything, you end up with the 3v2. So the idea of pinning Doucouré back, that's another sort of factor to it. Now, last but not least, we have to talk about the goal. And again, I'm going to use some screenshots to discuss this in a second. But I just want to quickly say before we go into that, I don't think this is just I don't think it's a system issue. I don't think it's it slightly is a personnel thing, but I think more than anything, it's an age thing, an experience thing, and a reps thing, to be honest. I think Chelsea have been really poor this season at sort of seeing out games where they actually do break that game state. So in the low block video, we spoke about going from a drawing game state, how to break that drawing game state and get into a winning game state. Now, twice now, against Fulham and against Palace, we've done that. Not that either of these teams, Palace more so with the back five, Fulham, they did play a back five against us as well, but they're slightly more aggressive versions. They're not like the epitome of a low block. But the idea is the same. They're looking to sort of sit a little bit deeper and break on you when you commit men forward to try and score. Both times we've broken that game state to a winning game state to go 1-0 up. And both times I've been disappointed with the pacing of the game and the inability to slow it down with sort of decision making and when to go forward, when to play backwards, when to just put your foot on the ball and just really calm things down, when to almost drop one man slightly deeper, just again, even just to adjust the position slightly. But again, I say it's not systematic because I think this is something that the players sort of need to ingrain in themselves. I don't think this is a Maresca problem. I think Maresca wants them to sort of play safer. I think at times we've seen when we go 1-0 up, Cucurella stops sort of playing so aggressive. He does actually come sort of a little bit deeper to add that little sort of sign of protection. And we also did see in the second half, Gusto was, again, at times, basically making that look like a back three. Like a 3-1 sort of base, because again he didn't want to get caught out by sort of someone like Eze who was just sort of playing in that channel. So I do think that the idea was to be slightly more protected in that second half, but when doing so you just have to be careful and you have to know when to recycle the ball. And again, we'll talk about it now, some screenshots, but that Palmer goal shows exactly another reason why it's not really working.
Now, Palmer receives the ball deeper in this area, and it is the 81st minute. Chelsea are 1-0 up, and they're looking to protect that lead. But what Palmer usually does in these areas, because of how he's sort of technically based and he's not about his physicality, he often goes for little clever nutmegs or little clever passes in these areas, which can put the team in danger and actually ups the tempo rather than slowing it down. And as you can see here, that's exactly what he tries to do, basically trying to put it through the legs of the Crystal Palace player. Can't actually remember who it was in this scenario. Might have been Lerma, but I can't remember. Which then leads to Chelsea conceding because of the spread back line, which again we speak about. Cucurella and Gusto could slightly be narrower because it is later in the game and to protect that game state. But this is the Palace game and the momentum chart, and you can see where Palace then took over in that second half. If you look at the first half compared to the second half, it's much more back, forth. Chelsea didn't really manage to get that control in the game. And the same can be said for the Fulham game. If you look at the chart again, after Chelsea's goal, where it looked like they're in very good stead and control, after that, it becomes a back and forth game from that point onward. And Fulham were the ones that come out victorious because of it. And I think Chelsea need to really nail down on figuring out how to control the game in that winning game state and just being able to slow the tempo down to their pace and rhythm.
So as I say, it's not a Palmer issue because I love Palmer, but I do think maybe late in games there could be a case as to whether you put him over to the right if it's only 1-0, because then you've still got him on the pitch because he can still make something happen if you need him. So you're not completely taking him off. Or if you're 2-0 up, you could probably bring him off the pitch and put somebody else on as a bit more of a closer to see out the game. And again, it's another thing like Caicedo and Enzo. I think they're two players that have shown they can do it in sort of periods this season, but I still need to see a little bit more in terms of just that ability to, because Enzo does it a lot, right? He'll get the ball and he will just slow it back down and he'll put his foot on and he'll just wait for the sort of shape to re-establish before looking to play. Cole does it as well, but I do think at times Chelsea is still, it's either ingrained in them from Poch still, or again, it's just a youth thing where they see space and they think instantly we have to exploit that space because it's open. So they look, because Palace have committed a few men forward, they obviously see Palmer's in the gap and instantly it will be like, if Cucurella's on the ball, it'll be instantly, all right, we need to drive. We need to drive up the pitch. We need to attack this space because that is what's open and that's where we can profit. And again, if you're clinical when you get those chances, then it's not an issue because then you put the game to bed. But something, again, another issue is we've not been clinical enough to be doing that because we don't put away a lot of those chances, which then leaves us susceptible to a 1-0 lead. We get countered, and that is the difference between 3 points and 1. So I hope that makes sense. Please do leave any comments and questions you have about that. Let me know if the screenshots and those little sections with the screenshots helped from the game. And do check back in a few days because we're going to have some transfer specials on the channel talking about a few profiles that I think Chelsea should go for, a few targets, and how I think they could help the team. So I think those will be some fun videos to make. Please do drop a like, as I said, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.